About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good evening and welcome to our latest live stream. I'm all on my own tonight. Well, I'm not. There are you lovely people watching this evening, and those of you watching live, please do join in with the activities. Pop your answers into the live chat window, and I'll keep an eye on what you're saying. If you're watching later on catch up, which we know lots of you do, then obviously you can't join in with the live banter, but you can pause the video and give yourself a bit longer on some of the activities. Okay, so we are looking at ethnicity in education tonight. We have over the last few sessions we've looked at social class and we've looked at gender, and I would say in some ways this one is more complex and slightly harder to answer than those. I mean, obviously when you're doing social class or gender, you've got to talk about which class you're writing about and which gender you're writing about when you're making a point. But obviously that's a bit more nuanced and complex when it comes to ethnicity, because there are a lot of ethnic groups you might be writing about. And also, generally speaking, when we're talking about differential achievement, with social class, it's generally why do working class pupils perform less well than middle class pupils, or vice versa. And with with gender, it tends to be why do girls do better. But while you might see so you sometimes see students writing, a sort of similarly simple argument of why do perhaps minority ethnic groups do less well. They don't, and we've got, you have to be more nuanced. You have to look through this and think, well, actually, some groups perform better than others. It's not a simple case of saying minority ethnic groups perform less well in education than white British pupils. In fact, white British pupils are one of the lower performing groups. So that's what we need to think a bit about when we're looking at this topic. So we've got a range of activities, and as I say, if you can join in the chat window, that would be brilliant. So our first one is we're going to look at some data, okay, just to get you thinking. So we're going to look at some data, and it is data showing percentage of high grades at A level. So it's quite a specific bit of education data. High grades at A level in 21-22, so the 21-22 cohort of students. And that we do have some of the data for 23 now, but we've got more data for 21-22, so that's why we've focused on this. And looking at it by ethnic group, broad ethnic group, you can be much more specific than this, and we'll look at that a bit later. But just by some broad ethnic groups, what percentage of those students from those groups got, first of all, 3 A star or A, all three, which are the pink graphs, and the blue graphs are AAB. They both kind of come under the heading of high grades. We'd all be happy with them, I'm sure. So I'm going to set a clock going, and I just want you to identify what are we seeing here? Which groups are performing well? Which groups are performing less well? You can start considering some reasons for that if you like. Just type some stuff into the chat window. What does this data suggest to you? But mainly, what are the key takeaways from it? We've got some nice soothing music while we go. I mean, one of the things I notice is that a lot of the graphs are actually pretty similar. Only 2 that are markedly different. Okay, I don't know whether some of you are still hovering over your keyboards and typing some stuff in. I don't want to kind of jump the gun and start making some points that you're typing in. I mean, if we just go, before I reveal a couple of key points underneath, if we just look across the graph, obviously the pink line's always going to be lower than the blue line. More people get AAB than A star AA or A star A star A, or even A star A star A star. So that's not surprising. All students will tend to be fairly similar to the white students. The majority of the students are white, and so it tends to be a similar sort of number. Might be pulled up or down a little bit by other groups. We can see there mixed race groups and Asian groups are not very dissimilar from the white and all students ones either. So it is the other 2 groups where we've got more significant differences. And yeah, they're the 2 that I sort of pulled out. People's identifying as Chinese got the highest proportion of high grades at A level. People's identifying as black got the lowest proportion of high grades at A level in that year, statistically. Okay, as I mentioned, these are pretty broad identities. Black will include Black Caribbean, Black African, where there will be significant differences between them. Within Asian, you get a number of different ethnic groups where there'll be significant differences between them. And also another thing to mention, say for example with say Chinese, we're talking about people who identify as being Chinese, of Chinese ethnicity. That's what they tick on on a form, on the census form or enrolment form for school, rather than, we're not talking about people from China necessarily. Some of them will be, but it might be that their family come from China or historic heritage from China. And all of that needs to be factored in with some of the other groups when we talk about that as well, because sometimes we might have a slightly wrong idea of what we're talking about, and that might lead us to incorrect conclusions for the reasons for that. For example, sometimes people say, "Oh, the education system in China is very different," which it is, but some of the pupils coming under Chinese there will have been to school in China, but probably most will not have done. So we need to be, when we think about the factors that are influencing this, need to go beyond of explanations. Okay, so we've picked up some interesting data there. Just go for a quick 3, 2, 1 now. So this one's an easier one for you to join in with, I'm sure. 3 in-school factors that might influence achievement, specifically by ethnicity. All of today's session's on ethnicity. 2 out-of-school factors influence achievement by ethnicity. And I think this one's a tough one. 1 social policy that was specifically aimed to tackle ethnic differences in achievement. Okay, let's see what you guys come up with. I'll set the music going and the timer going. You've got 90 seconds to come up with stuff. If you just so that I know which question you're answering, if you just put 3 before a factor, or 2 before a factor, or 1 before a policy, then I'll know which question you're addressing. Okay, here we go.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So, what have we got? I'm sure you could all come up with some in-school and out-of-school factors. Let's see them. I know you've got this, guys. Oh, thank you, Kat. So Kat has suggested for these will be in-school factors influencing achievement, teacher racism and teacher labelling. We've got material deprivation as an out-of-school factor influencing achievement. Institutional racism. Yeah, I mean, obviously if the institution we're talking about is the school, then that might be an in-school factor, but institutional racism, it could be other institutions we're talking about that would have that impact. Structural racism as well, societal racism on a broader level could well be influencing achievement. So thanks, Kat. Anyone else got some, or any ideas for a social policy, or another in-school factor or 2, or another out-of-school factor or 2? Give people another few seconds just to see what else we've got. So we got some good responses from Kat there. Well done. So we've got 3 that I came up with, but I think we've already got some others in the chat window, and I'm sure you could add more. Labelling, absolutely. The presence of an ethnocentric curriculum could have an impact in various ways. If people might want to type in the chat window what they mean by an ethnocentric curriculum. Oh, well done, Kat's already done that. People of colour not represented in the school curriculum, absolutely. Subcultural formation, we put that down as one for social class a couple of weeks ago, but we absolutely could apply it to ethnicity as well. You'll have covered some studies into subcultures that are based around ethnicity rather than social class, or possibly as well as social class and gender. Okay, yeah, brilliant. Kat's gone into more detail about the ethnocentric curriculum, focusing on history and how things like the Cold War and British history kind of dominate over, for example, Jewish history or Black history. Yeah, very good. Although, you know, for example, we might do quite a bit on, not lots actually, but you might do a bit of colonial history, but it'll tend to be sort of as it impacted Britain or as it had an influence on Britain, more so than the countries that were colonised. You know, probably, you know, you mentioned Jewish history there, probably limited largely to things in relation to the Second World War and things like that. So yeah, so that's interesting. It's not just about history, of course, but history is quite a good example to use to illustrate it. Of course, we could probably do a counter argument to say that schools put quite a lot of effort into trying to not do that, and perhaps to promoting things like Black History Month, for example, to try and go beyond an ethnocentric curriculum. But it is definitely a factor that you could talk about. In terms of out of school factors, then parental attitudes. It's what we might term come under sort of cultural differences type of heading. When we're trying to explain, for example, the data on that last slide, whether some parents from some cultural backgrounds particularly value education or see education as being a higher value than others, arguably, and then intersection with social class. And I think you mentioned this, Kat, in the chat window, material deprivation. Some minority ethnic groups are more likely to be working class, are more likely to have low incomes statistically, and so therefore factors that relate to that will also have an impact on that. Okay. There are a number of policies we could have picked up on. I think I went for a 2000s one, aiming high, which was a focus. It was particularly aimed at black pupils, trying to encourage high aspirations, and particularly staying on in school after 16 and potentially university and things like that. But there have been plenty of other policies over the years, some directly addressing ethnic differences, and others that are perhaps more indirect. That was one of the aims of some of the policies would be to try and tackle inequality around ethnicity, where it probably would have had other motives and intentions as well. Okay. Going to look at some more data now, but a bit of fun. We're going to just try and decide whether the next number is going to be higher or lower than the one that comes up. We're looking at average attainment 8 score. This is again the 21-22 cohort, and we're going to start with the white British pupils with an average attainment 8 score of 47.7. Don't worry too much about how attainment 8 scores are calculated, but it's a measure of GCSE attainment, which you're probably aware of it from your time at school, but don't worry if you're not. But all you need to know is if it's higher, it means they've done better at GCSE. If it's lower, they've done less well. So Pakistani pupils. Again, this is people who would or have identified their ethnicity, or their parents have identified their ethnicity as being Asian, and then the subset of that, Pakistani. Do we think that's going to be higher or lower? Alex has gone lower. And Kat's gone lower. Yeah. So this is interesting. This was the 21-22 GCSE results. It was actually a little bit higher. I think it's probably reasonable to suggest it's not particularly statistically significant. Certainly, a lot of the textbooks will identify the likelihood of being lower because 5-10 years ago that was the trend, and it's interesting to see changes. I think another big factor to take into account here for both these ethnic groups that we've had there so far and the next one that's going to come is that you also get significant differences by gender, with boys doing better than girls. Girls doing better than boys. Get it right. You want to look at that. We're just looking in general across the whole ethnic group here, but you do get differences by gender within these ethnic groups as well. Okay, next one, Black Caribbean. Do we think it's going to be higher or lower than 49.1? If it helps from people coming to a conclusion with this one, yeah, Kat's gone lower, Alex has gone lower. I was going to say this one has changed less since some of the textbooks, etc., than Pakistani data. Yeah, this one is lower, 41.7%. So yeah, quite significantly low. Okay, the last two we're using a different measure rather than by ethnic group. I just wanted to point out there are groups higher and lower than what we've seen there. So I could have chosen to use, as we've already mentioned, Chinese or Indian peoples would give us a higher score. Traveller, Roma pupils would give us a lower score. But we're going to look at a couple of different measures now. So this is probably incorporating most of the people we've just seen on that list, although not all. People with English as a first language. So this is obviously the majority of pupils that sit GCSEs, but do we think that it's going to be higher or lower than 41.7? This is probably the easier of the two in this list, in that it's going to be broadly the average. Yeah, so Alex has gone higher, and yeah, it is higher, 49.6. Okay. Yeah, so pretty high. Okay. What about people who report their first language being something other than English? What do we reckon? Last one. Kat's gone lower. Alex has gone lower. This is a good one to use for evaluation because sometimes when people give reasons for differential educational achievement by ethnicity, sometimes people will include language issues as a factor, and it can sometimes be a factor, so I'm not saying it's incorrect, but a good evaluation of that would be that actually in GCSE scores in 21-22, pupils with a first language other than English actually scored higher than those with English as a first language. Why might that be? Well, it's pretty impressive to be bilingual or multilingual, so often that'll be some pretty bright students, and it helps with it helps with cognitive development and things like that. We're talking about relatively small numbers of children, but it's an interesting stat there. Okay, if anyone's got any questions about that, do pop them into the chat window. But this activity, we're going to consider some sides to a debate now, or think about a debate. So outline two arguments that processes within schools, so we've already talked about these a little bit, things like labelling, etc., have a significant impact on educational achievement by ethnicity. We're going to start with, I want the arguments that they do. So you might want to give me examples, studies, ways in which they do, bearing in mind that we're going to consider the other side of the argument in a moment. So I'll give you a little bit of time to type some stuff into the chat window. Think about arguments that processes within schools have a significant impact on educational achievement by ethnicity. So what do we mean by processes within schools? It could be things like labelling, it could be things like subcultural development, it could be things like setting and streaming. Okay, so vibes have said that labels given to pupils can give a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure or indeed of high achievement. Absolutely. Cats put ethnocentric curriculum makes people of colour feel underrepresented and unheard, which causes frustration and may lead to creating anti-school subcultures. Excellent, and that's a nicely developed point. Well done. Really like both of those points from Vibes and Cat. Vibes, I just wonder if you could develop that a little bit further, what sorts of labels or which groups might get labelled as high achieving and which groups might get labelled as lower achieving and why. I know that's got a lot to type into a chat window, don't worry too. Vibes for assessment changes reduced black pupils' achievement straight away. Yeah, there's some interesting research into a number of the changes that have taken place since kind of 2010, but it's quite a long time now. But we've got a number of policy changes that are brought in, including assessment changes that have increased the achievement gap between black pupils and other pupils. Yeah, for a variety of reasons. This study goes into a number of possible explanations. Black pupils are labelled negatively due to racialised expectations from their teachers. Well done, Vibes. Yeah, very good. Yeah, absolutely. And some other groups may well be labelled positively due to racialised expectations from their teachers that could have a self-fulfilling prophecy of high achievement. When we think about that idea of the sort of the ideal pupil and the halo effect, which it's generally we think about that in terms of social class, and but there is perhaps an expectation, for example, that Asian girls will be academic and serious about the studies. Some of the stereotypes that people have. There we go. Cat saying Chinese students labelled as docile and well behaved. Yeah, so you do get these labels that may have an impact on achievement. Okay, well done. You've ended up with probably loads more than I've put there. I've gone some broad brush headings. I think formation of pro and anti-school subcultures around ethnic groups, and the impact of racism within the classroom and the school community can have an impact on in the various ways that we talked about there through labelling and elsewhere. What about a counter argument then that they don't have a significant impact on educational achievement by ethnicity, that this isn't really these sorts of points aren't really what leads to these differences that we've been seeing? I mean, one I don't think I've typed in there, but it's an interesting one, is if it's about people feeling unrepresented and unheard. The curriculum I wouldn't have thought particularly hears or represents Chinese or Indian pupils more than some of the other ethnic groups that we talked about. Well, sorry, I missed a couple of those. But Vibes had put, this is on the other side of the first argument, pupils may not may not oh no, sorry, this is for this, isn't it? Pupils may not internalise a label. Yeah, absolutely. They might reject a label. Yeah, and Fuller's girls, yeah, succeeded. Yeah, excellent point. Yes, well done. Chinese girls on free school meals achieve better than white girls not on free school meals. Okay, so yes, I mean that's a really good and interesting argument. It's one kind of against the idea that it's that it's down to social class and material factors outside school, I suppose, in a way. But it's an interesting argument to consider. Yeah. I think I've probably cheated with one of my points, which is the kind of what we'd class as juxtaposed evaluation, which is the out of school factors might be more significant, and we could make arguments for why they could be. Therefore perhaps it's the out of school factors that are important, not those. I'll pick up Vibe's point about abolishing streaming in a moment, because that's a good one. And also there have been various attempts by schools to try and combat inequality, policies and procedures in schools to try and avoid some of these issues. Decolonising curriculum, that's relatively recent, but mention policies and procedures in the schools to try and deal with things like racism and ethnocentric curriculum. And I was going to say, differences prevail, and they do, but as we saw in the one of the earlier activities, there have been quite significant changes as well, and some groups are definitely performing better than they were 5 or 6 years ago. There's less inequality in some respects between some ethnic groups than there used to be in terms of educational achievement, although there are still some very stark differences. And the gender differences are probably particularly gender difference within ethnic groups are particularly notable. Yes, there was a study by Ball about abolishing streaming, and it's probably more applicable to social class, but you can apply it to ethnicity as well, which was essentially that that this had a positive impact on inequality. Obviously, there are arguments in favour of streaming, which we could consider on another occasion. Okay, has anyone got anything else they'd like to add or ask about this particular question before I go back to my studio? I think you've given some really good answers there, so thanks for joining in and getting involved. I'm back here. Now that was great, really good. And I want to let you know, I keep doing this, saying I'm going to let you know what we're doing next time, when hopefully it won't just be me on my own. Just having a quick look. It's going to be educational policies next time. Okay, so that'll be fun. So we'll be looking at policies. I'm hoping I've got that right. Does that sound right? Actually, I'm not. Yeah, I think so. I might have got it wrong. What topic we'll be doing once education's finished? So we'll be looking at some methods in context, which I know is still education a bit, but we'll be looking at methods in context. So we'll be starting to consider some methods, some theory and methods, which will take us up till Christmas. Really, we'll do a sort of Christmas festive blast, and then we'll have a think about what we'll do in the new year. But yeah, we're getting there with education, and I've had some really good responses today and at other times. So thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions. We will see you next time, and hopefully I won't be on my own. I don't think I will. Okay, next time. Yeah, no, you're welcome, Alex. And excellent answers in the chat window from Alex, Vibes, Kat. Oh, I shouldn't have started listing because now I'll forget people. I think that's. Hope I've got everyone. Okay, well done, and see you next time. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye bye.